So I just read The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. And what The Tipping Point is about is basically not everything goes up in a steady trend. Not all businesses go straight up. Some get to one point, and that's just what sets them off. Not just businesses, it's basically everything. He talks a lot about fashion trends. Just depends on those key people to find the product and to really embrace it, and then it goes on to the next level and eventually it blows up. So the types of people are, first, the kind of weird person who does this weird thing. He gives an example of like a paper boy might use duct tape on the bottom of his pants to keep it from getting caught when he's riding his bike, and then someone a little cooler might see him and be like, that's kind of a cool look, but I'm going to do it with Velcro, and eventually it becomes a trend like that. He gives all different examples. Another example was hush puppies, he talks about throughout the book, which is a type of shoe which was cool like a while ago, and then it wasn't. And then like the hipsters started wearing it, and then it blew up again. He said there are probably like a couple hundred key people in the entire city of New York, and then it just blew up from there. He talks about broken window policing and things like that, where you basically have graffiti on your trains, was one example. He made sure that there was never any graffiti on the trains, not him, but the person he was talking about in the New York City subway department. And they make sure there's never any graffiti on their trains. Every time it went to a station, it was either cleaned off or they just wouldn't use the train. They also took more steps in action against people who did not want to pay and kind of jumped over the barriers or whatever, and they would basically arrest them over a $1.25 violation or whatever. And the reason they used to not do that is because it would take the entire day, and it'd be a small crime, and like, why would you prosecute over that? Just give them a warning and let them go. So in doing this, they found out that they could reduce it by making it more efficient to about an hour instead of a whole day. So now each officer is doing 8 per shift instead of 1. The other thing is they found that 1 in 7 people that skipped the line and were caught actually had an outstanding warrant for their arrest. So they got rid of a lot of the bigger crimes from that. In addition to that, 1 in 20 people had a weapon on them, which they were not supposed to have. So all these little crimes that they're now enforcing, the graffiti and, the ticket skipping, whatever, that all basically served as a purpose to capture everything else. He talks about other traps similar to this. He talks about how he saw in the shower one day on a bar of soap, he was like, if you have any questions on the soap, it said if you had any questions to call this number. And that's basically what he calls a trap for the mavens, who are the people who are like the trendsetters and really, really care about things. He talks about how in a supermarket, putting something and just writing sale, putting it like right directly in the aisle, writing sale, that will give you the same amount of increase in volume versus if you actually discount it and put sale. Because the vast majority of people don't really look at the price. They just see sale and they buy it. The mavens are the people who actually look at the price, and they're the ones that make sure everything's fair, basically, because they're the ones that'll complain to the store and the Better Business Bureau and things like that. They're the ones that are really looking out. They're like the weird people, like who does that, but they're the ones that are looking out for everyone's best interest by calling about the chemicals in the soap. And then from there, they will be, someone will notice them, like a cool person will take notice of them, and they will pass it on to like the influencer who shares it to everyone, and eventually it blows up. So the tipping point may be when the cool person notices the weird person who has always been like looking at these little chemicals in the soap, and then eventually the whole soap makeup gets changed just from that one thing. So in business, they gave an example about a company called Airwalk, and Airwalk made shoes for skateboarders, and they were like the really cool brand, and they sold in boutique stores and stuff like that, and they had revenues of about $7 million. So they hired this marketing firm, which was like the best decision they ever made, because one of the people there was very obsessed with these trends. So what she would do is try to find trends and then kind of capitalize them before the bubble popped, like as they're rising up. So in the shoe industry, they had to basically plan out everything a year in advance. So their designs, their commercials. So they would do it before the thing is popular, and they would have a huge advantage because they're putting out like the popular type of advertisements. For example, I think it was when the X-Files were big or something like that. They had an advertisement where the guy was kidnapped by aliens and they stole his shoes. Just little things like that. And basically they anticipated that the X-Files was going to be popular before it actually was. And all different things like that. And she was able to capitalize on that. She would basically look for people who are out of place to see like when the cool person was noticing the weird people. She talks about how like she would go to a coffee shop, everyone would have blue hair, and then there's this like super average looking guy. So she would talk to that super average looking guy, see why he's there, get his phone number, check in with him every year, every couple months even, and see if she could predict changes off of that. They said it wasn't like an exact science, but it could be interpreted to predict the future. Eventually, Airwalk grows to almost 200 million in sales with all their amazing advertising campaigns going after that. Another example was with Paul Revere. When the British were coming, he was the type of person who was very social, and he was like the person who gave people information. That's kind of like what he was known for. So, little known fact, there were actually two people that night, split in opposite directions. Only Paul Revere was successful and remembered because the other guy was not like that, the right type of person for that job. Paul Revere also, it was kind of also urgent. He said if it was Paul Revere's afternoon ride, it wouldn't have been known as it was today, versus the midnight ride, because that shows urgency. Like, he would have preferred to ride in the afternoon, I'm sure, but he didn't have time. He just went for it. So that's another thing. Basically, just get to that point, and then everything just goes from there. It's not always like your goal is so far out of reach. Sometimes you just have to take that one more step, and that'll get you all the way there.